Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, we're going to cover how to save books on champions. Now you may be able to tell my voice is not all here today, but I hope I'm going to be able to get through this video, and I apologize for the poor vocal quality of the audio. Now rather than just give you a list of champions that you don't need to use books on, I'm going to teach you the 3 scenarios where you can potentially save books on champions. That's going to allow you to judge for yourself if you have any of those champions on your roster. And it may even affect who you decide to 6-star next when you don't have a lot of tomes in reserve. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Now, when talking about books, the first thing we need to know is that there are 4 different types of bonuses that books give you on champions' skills. Actually, there are 5, but the 5th one is for mythicals. So for most champions, there are only 4 bonuses that are even available from books. As you can see here on Cardiel's A1, there are 2 of the 4 bonuses here. You can get a bonus in damage, and you can get a healing bonus as well. Both of these are multiplicative, by the way. So when we look at that healing, it says heals all allies by 7.5% of their max HP. And then we get, at level 3, we get a book here, heal plus 5. That does not bring it up to a 12.5% heal. Rather, that just adds 5% healing to the 7.5% heal that is already there. So when we book Cardiel's A1 all the way out, we get a bonus of 20% heal, and that takes the heal from 7.5% to 9%. Okay, now the third type of bonus you can get from a book is a cooldown reduction, like we've got here on Cardiel's A2. So cooldowns can tend to be very powerful bonuses. And so in most cases, we're going to try to get these cooldowns if we can, although for some champions, we won't need to. And then finally, the 4th type of bonus is a buff debuff chance increase. This will also affect instant effects like turn meter decrease. And in a lot of cases, these are important books for support champions. But again, sometimes we can get away without them. Now that we know the 4 types of bonuses we get from books, let's talk about the 3 scenarios where you can save books on champions. And the first scenario is champions that can do almost their full complement of power, or at least serve their primary purpose without any additional books at all. I'm going to give you an example here from my own roster. Okay, so here we have Doom Priest. She's an excellent cleanser and healer, and her kit is set up in such a way that it requires no books at all. The primary purpose of this character is this passive. Heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP and removes 1 random debuff from them at the start of this champion's turn. So when Doom Priest goes, she heals everybody and cleanses 1 debuff. This can be very powerful in a lot of content, but especially in Clan Boss for making your speed tune affinity friendly. As you can see, the passive requires no books. It can't be improved with more books. And therefore, her primary purpose is completely fulfilled, whether she is level 40 or level 50 or level 60, whether she has books or not, even whether she's masteried or not. Now, she will get more powerful with better gear, with more levels, and with better masteries, but you can usually save on books here because this passive is at full power. If you look at her A1, she can get additional damage out of books here, but she does very little damage, and you probably won't need this extra damage at any point. And then her A2 places the large increase attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So if you needed her to place that increased attack in a particular comp, you could potentially try to put 1 book in here for that cooldown, but in most cases, you won't need it. Again, she's a champion that can do 95% of her effectiveness with just her passive with no books. There are a few champions like this out there in the game, but sometimes you also have a champion who can be just very strong without books, even if they get stronger when you add books. And I'll give you another example. So here we have Jexstar Blood Twin. Now, Jexstar Blood Twin is a powerful legendary that you can get for free from the 3v3 Bazaar. And when you get him, if you don't have any legendary tomes, that's all right. You can still take him up to 6-star, and he's going to be very effective for you without any books. Now, Jexstar does get stronger with books. Unlike Doom Priest, you could significantly improve his performance with books, but depending on what you want to do with him, he may not need any books at all. So let's quickly look at his kit. You'll see his A1 is a 3-hitter that has a chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Heals this champion by 20% of the damage inflicted if the target is under HP burn debuffs. And as you can see here, the books only add damage. They do not increase the chance of HP burn. So the value here is just extra damage. He's not really a damage dealer. You don't care about his direct damage, so you don't need to use any of these books. Here we have an AoE that has a 40% chance of a provoke debuff for 1 turn, and this chance increases to 100% if the target is under HP burn debuffs. This will also place a decrease attack but debuff for 2 turns if the provoke is placed. So here's the thing, if you have HP burns out there, this has a 100% chance to land the provoke. So that means you don't need the extra damage. Again, we already know we don't need extra damage on this guy. And we don't need the buff debuff chances because we already have a 100% chance here. It is conditional, but you're going to bring him into a team that has HP burns or where he provides HP burns. The one book that could be valuable here would be the cooldown. But since you have to spend 5 books to get there, you can basically say, I'm not going to put any books into the A2 either. And then finally, we have the A3 that has a 55% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns on the attacker when hit. So if anybody attacks Drexthar, you have a 55% chance of placing an HP burn on that attacker. Now, in this case, the books would get you up to a 75% chance, which is a nice increase, but it doesn't like get it to a 100% chance. And those 20% additional chance bonuses are not so powerful that he can't do the job without them. So we don't need the damage books. We don't need the debuff books. And we don't really need even the cooldown reduction book. And if we did, it would just require a lot of books to get there. So will Drexthar get stronger if you book him out? Of course, he will do more damage. He will land his HP burns more consistently. He'll have a reduced cooldown on his AoE provoke. But chances are you can use Drexthar completely unbooked for a very long time. I got this champion about 2 months into the game. I am now somewhere along 26 or 27 months into the game. No, more. Almost 28 months into the game. And I've still never booked Drexthar, and anytime I use him, he gets the job done just fine. Okay, so now we're going to talk about scenario 2, and that is where a champion has a particular skill that can get a lot stronger when booked, but the rest of the kit doesn't require books. So in this case, it's not that you're going to run the champion without any books at all, but if you get lucky, and if you book them properly, you can potentially save several books on a champion. Now, this is my high Katun. I actually do have her fully booked because I have tons of epic tomes at this point in the game, but I ran her for over a year with only 1 book in her. Now, the book that is most important is on the A2. Her primary purpose is to be a turn meter filler and a speed increaser, and that's what this A2 does. So getting this down to a 3-turn cooldown is really important. Now, I was lucky enough that my very first book went into this skill, and so I got the most valuable book first. And that meant I didn't have to spend any of the books on the A1, and I didn't have to spend any of the books on the A3. Now, the A1 and the A3 can be effective in certain content, but if you don't need her for those particular skills, or if you don't mind that she isn't as reliable with those skills as she could be, you could potentially save 5 books here on the A3 and another 5 books here on the A1. That means you're saving 10 out of the 11 books that High Katun can use. I'll give you another example that is even more clear than High Katun. Here I've got Sylar. Now, Sylar is a support champion whose biggest skill is this A3, and you definitely want to book out her A3. This places an AoE decrease speed on all enemies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown, and it also decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 40%. This is the reason to have her on most teams, and so you're going to go ahead and want to book this A3. Now, her A2 is decent as well. It's an AoE. You can get a little bit more damage, and you can increase the chance of landing your decrease accuracy debuff up to 100%. So anytime you can get to 100% on a debuff, that tends to be a good thing. Decrease accuracy is not necessarily a high priority debuff. So if you need the decrease accuracy, you could certainly book this out. And it would also book down to a 3-turn cooldown with a 2-turn debuff, which is very nice. But you don't have to book the A2 at all if you don't want. Now, I didn't want to actually book the A2, but in order to book the A3, I had to put in books. And when you place books, they go randomly into the skills, and this is what happened. But you'll notice I have not booked the A1 at all, and that is because Sylar does not need to do damage. So these 4 books that increase the damage of her A1 would only very slightly improve her performance. I run her in a stun set, so the fact that the A1 is an AoE helps me out with the stun set, and the A2 is an AoE, that helps me out with the stun set, but I don't actually need the damage that she brings, and so I haven't booked her A1. So whether you have a champion like High Katun where you really only need 1 skill with a book, or you have a champion with Sylar where you have one skill where you just want to avoid books. If you book these champions one book at a time, or maybe 2 books at a time, you can potentially get lucky and not have to book them all the way out. This is going to be the most common scenario where you're going to try to save books on 1 or 2 skills on a champion, because the vast majority of supports can be booked in this manner. So right now you can probably look on your roster and find a champion like this who just doesn't need 1 skill booked out. Now let's talk about the third scenario. Now the third scenario is when you have a champion who for their primary purpose doesn't need any books, but in order for their versatility does need books. So for instance, Arbiter here is an extremely strong champion that can be used in a lot of places, but her primary role is as a go first aura and speed lead in the arena. And the most important skill for Arbiter in order to do that, other than her aura, which is very nice and strong in arena battles, is her A3. Places an increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, then fills a turn meter of all allies by 30%. Now, this book reduces the cooldown of this skill, but if you are building a go first arena team, the goal of that team is to nuke the enemy team out in 1 turn. So hopefully you won't have to use this A3 more than once. You'll use it once and that'll be enough. So what that means is when you first get your Arbiter, you can run her completely unbooked. You don't need any books in the A1 because you're not going to use the A1. You don't need any books in the A2. You're not going to use the A2. And you don't need any cooldown reduction on her revive because you're not going to revive. The whole goal of this champion is to create a team that wins before the enemy even goes. So if you have a scenario like this, you can potentially run these champions without books. Okay, here we are in Classic Arena with an arena team that I've built. Now this arena team actually embodies all 3 scenarios that we were talking about with champions. You can save books on these types of champions in all 3 ways. So I'm going to take you into the team setup here and you're going to see what I mean. So here is this team. Now I do have all of these champions booked, but I want to show you that you can use the 3 scenarios that we talked about on this particular Go First Arena team, and it would still be extremely effective. So the first scenario is a champion that doesn't need any books to do their job well, and that would be Madame Saris. So in this particular case, if I have Madame Saris as a specialist who I'm only using in arena to remove buffs, on her A3, she has a skill that removes all buffs from enemies and places a decreased attack debuff and a decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Now, without books, this is already a 100% chance. So there is no additional benefit to booking out this skill on a go first team. Again, remember, the idea of this team is to win on the first turn. So if she removes all the buffs from the enemies and places a decreased defense, and she can do that without any books, then I can literally run her unbooked completely. I don't need a single book on Madame Saris for her to do her primary job and do it very well. Now on Deacon Armstrong, I have a champion which I can book out partially and have him be very effective. His A1 has a double hitter and it has a chance of landing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Now that leech can play in some places, but as you can see, the 6 books that this skill requires only give me 20% additional damage on a very weak hitting skill, and then 20 additional % chance on a leech that already has a 30% chance. So is there a benefit to booking out this A1? Absolutely. But do you need this A1 booked? Absolutely not. You're going to want to have the A2 and the A3 booked out for those cooldown reductions because you're going to use Deacon in more places than just in arena. And those cooldown reductions are going to play in a lot of other fights. Additionally, you want the 100% chance to land the decreased defense on the A2. But you can certainly save books by not booking out his A1 if you don't have the books available, or you just want to wait for a time when you have a lot more books. And then we also have a second example of this where you can partially book a champion and get a lot of value here. Remember, Genbo's job here is to be the nuker and just hit the team once and hopefully kill them. So he is going to be using his A3, but we don't care about the cooldown reduction because the cooldown reduction doesn't help. It doesn't improve the buffs. It doesn't give him the extra turn. He's going to get that anyway. So we don't need to book the A3. We do want to book the A2 because we want as much damage as possible on this skill. So we want at least 3 books here. And then the A1 doesn't require any books either because we're not going to be using it on our go first team. Now, he will get stronger if you book him out, but you can book him only partially and get a lot of value out of your Genbo. Finally, we have the Arbiter we already mentioned here. We know that she is the representative of Scenario 3. She's a champion that you can delay books on. She's going to get the job done with her A3 without any books at all, but because she's so valuable and so strong and usable in so many places, you will eventually want to book her out. Okay, so that is it. The 3 scenarios where you can save books on champions. And by the way, it doesn't matter if it's a rare champion, an epic champion, or a legendary champion. You can use these 3 methods on all of your champion roster. Obviously, because you get the fewest legendary tomes, it may be the most valuable to choose legendaries based on one of these 3 scenarios or book them based on one of these 3 scenarios. But early in the game, you're also going to probably be short on epic tomes, and you're going to find a lot of value in epics that you can book either partially or even not at all. If you have multiple champions that you want to run up to 6 stars currently, and you don't have books for all of them, that's okay if one of them can be used at least temporarily without books and still provide a lot of value, like Arbiter, or even permanently provide value without any books like Drexthar. So take a look at your roster, and I'm sure you'll find some champions that fall into one of these 3 categories and are going to allow you to save some books. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Or if you have a champion that you know you want to spread some word about who can be very good without any books, also put that in the comments below. Thanks for hanging out. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.